Greetings, glory and honor to our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. I'm Salvador Cordova. I am so privileged to be joined by Dr. Royal Truman. He's a chemist, and he's had a long and illustrious career. He is based in Germany, and I know that there are many German speaking people that watch my channel, so I'm especially glad that he is here. A little bit of background of how we met. I had bouts of agnosticism. You could say, briefly, I had lost faith, and it wasn't thankfully for very long. And this was around 25, not quite 25 years ago. And I couldn't understand the problem of evil. I said, if there's an intelligent designer and God, why doesn't he fix the world? He has all this power. And I was also troubled. It's like, well, God, you could make yourself so evident as the air we breathe. Why haven't you done that? So many of us are seeking after you. And just briefly for those viewers, the answers to those questions has been what this channel has been about. It says in Proverbs 25:2, it's the glory of God to conceal a matter. It's the glory of kings to search out a matter. And having been in the sciences, finding the truth is often never very easy, but it is possible. And I do believe that God has hidden some things for us to discover so that he can sift out those who really want to pursue and discover him, versus he makes it really easy for those who want nothing to do with him to be able to close their eyes and just believe what they want. The study of facts have brought me back to the faith. If people wonder why there is such trouble in the world, the answer is in 2 Corinthians 4:17. This momentary light affliction is building for us an eternal weight of glory.
Yeah.
I one time read the story of Snow White to my Bible study, and I said, would the happy ending be as beautiful if there were no evil queen in the story? Mm-hmm. They all totally got it.
Yeah.
And so suddenly I realized it's the glory of God to allow us to suffer, like the blind man in John chapter 9. The apostles asked, why is this man blind? Jesus said, it is so that the works of God may be shown in him. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes it is through tragedy that God's glory is revealed, and the happy ending for those who believe in our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ is made even more beautiful because of our more momentary light affliction. So I just had to put that out there because I know many of my viewers who are especially students of science and having the same questions. That is how I got through some of this. And the way I met Royal Truman was when I'd given up, just, I was tired of just hearing the sermons, just saying believe. And I'm just like, well, you have to give me some reason to believe. You need to inspire faith in me. Just demanding it from the pulpit is not going to help me. In fact, it kind of drove me away. I said, look, it seems to me that you have really no evidence. And that's why all you could do is just kind of beg that I believe. Mm-hmm. And so I left the faith briefly, not completely. Mm-hmm. I'd say I was halfway out. Mm-hmm. And I said, okay, the only thing I can do that I know, at the time I had 3 science degrees and I undergraduate. And I was like, okay, this is where I could begin. Mm-hmm. And I said, the one place I think it seems that there's evidence of God is in the origin of life, and the first life. And I began reading, and I stumbled on various works, and that's how I was reading Royal Truman's work on chemistry, and just like, this is so fascinating. And there were others. And then Royal Truman I saw him on a discussion forum, ISCID, and people were talking about this computer thing called Avita that proves evolution. and he argued against it so effectively. And I started to take that apart. And I
Mhm.
said, I think the rest, I, I think the rest of the world, most of them, are just deluded
Mm.
because the chemistry disagrees. The chemistry, the probability. I studied
Yeah.
physics. I studied little chemistry.
Mhm.
Definitely lots of engineering. And I looked at the machines of life, and I said, no,
Mhm.
the, uh, people have got it wrong. It's staring
Yeah.
us in the face.
Mm.
And
Mhm.
I was on a mission then to see, okay, yeah, 99% of the world may be wrong, but what does the
Mm.
chemistry say? What does
Mhm.
the physics
Yeah.
say? Because that is my training. And
Mhm.
Royal's work had inspired me.
Mhm.
And so he basically he was one
Wow.
of several people that rescued my soul. I
Wow.
feel deeply indebted to him.
Hmm.
So that's a long introduction to how we met,
Mm.
first on the internet, and then we finally met at a private conference 4 years ago, and I'm so grateful to have finally met him in person. So that was a long introduction to about what this channel is about and about you, and it's given me a chance to express my gratitude
Mm.
to the rest of the world for all the work that you've done. So,
Mm.
Royal, can you please tell us what your profession is? And I know that
Mhm.
you're retired.
Not at all. I started off as an organic chemist, which is a very, very good foundation for the rest of science. Gives you kind of the basics. Also studied computer science, which is why I got into the discussions you mentioned about Avida. Got an MBA to make sure I stayed employed. And basically, most of my life has been self-learning. So everything I know about molecular biology and systems biology and the things that I'm currently so involved in is all self-learned, which may not be so unusual because I grew up in South America as a missionary's kid and went to Spanish speaking schools. So basically, all my English skills and so many other things were self learned or homeschooled anyway. So that's basically my
Wow.
background.
So, what languages do you speak?
I still remember my English, Spanish and French were the next two, then German, and then Portuguese.
How long have you lived in Germany at this point?
More than half my life now. I first went, for the most part, in '88, intending to stay for 2 years as part of my career. They wanted a scientist who could advise on what new IT technologies we should be looking into. So that was just basically an open-ended card to do whatever I wanted to do for a couple of years, and ended up marrying here in Spain.
Wow. Um, Now, backstage, you had mentioned that you're part of an association. There are many German speakers who visit my channel, and I want to make sure that they might be connected to each other.
Mhm.
Um, we, uh, in the United States, creationism is very large. A large proportion of the
Mhm.
United States believe in creation. Even larger proportion believe in some form of intelligent design.
Mhm.
Um, and the United States is kind of unique in that for technologically advanced cultures. And so, uh, my concern is for the German-speaking audience that visit my channel. By the way, I'm so grateful that they would tune in. They might want to be acquainted with some organizations that they could be a part of, and
Mhm.
they might be lucky enough to, if you speak at some of their conferences, they might be lucky enough to actually meet you. Uh, there is, um, there are graduate students, including PhDs in Germany, who were German speakers that would probably be interested in connecting. So, can you tell us a little bit about the organization and how they might
Mhm.
find it?
You will find there are these organizations in every country in Europe, but Germany is probably has the largest one, and it goes under Wort und Wissen. And they offer specialized conferences at least once a year in many topics. Like we have one coming up in March again, dedicated to biological topics. January, there's one dedicated to philosophy, philosophy of science, philosophy. There's a geology group, there's a physics group, there is an economics, ethics group, there's a computer science group. So the different, very technical conferences that they can join. I strongly, strongly recommend doing that, joining some of these groups.
So what I will do is after the recording's over, I will get the information, the website. I will in the video description below
Mhm.
of this video. I will post it. So you all out there who are in Germany or nearby and would be interested in attending these conferences or finding out more or at least connecting, I will do my best to make sure you have at least a starting point and a URL. So um, you had did you have managerial positions in
Yeah.
your work in chemistry?
Yeah, I worked for BASF, which is the world's largest chemical firm, and it's customary there to move around into different parts of the organization, do different things. So some was senior management, some was technical, but in many areas, everything from research to programming to manufacturing to strategic planning, competitor analysis, setting up joint ventures. Really a very exciting mishmash of activities.
Why don't you share, just for the viewers' benefit, your walk with the Lord?
Right.
I think so. We'll not be so technical. We'll go back to something everyone can relate to.
Hmm.
So you can talk about your walk with God and why
Hmm.
you chose science as how
Okay.
you felt the Lord called you to that
Hmm.
profession.
Right. Before I do that, I just want to comment on what you said about you using science to maybe gain insight or evidence for existence of God. That's not where I started, but I ended up there. And I can only tell you, viewers, that the evidence for God, especially in biology, molecular biology, and of course chemistry, is overwhelming. One has to be deliberately blind or simply ignorant. You don't know enough data or facts to discuss intelligently. But if you do, then you're deliberately blind not to see what is so obvious to see. And we could have session after session where I can just give you one example after the other, where the evidence is like right in front of you, and anybody denying this, especially those working in the field, they're denying for reasons that have nothing to do with science. Like, I know this is an aside, but I'm working now on a paper for a secular journal of all things on the RNA world hypothesis. You've got to be deliberately blind if you have read into the area and looked into it, not to see that this cannot be true. It cannot be true. Just
Yes,
chemically speaking, it's utterly utter rubbish. And you can go as deep as you want. You can go into all the arguments about RNA being also found in ribosome. You can use any argument you want. If you think about it a little bit, you realize that makes utterly no sense. But that's not where I started. You see, I began already in a Christian home. You see, as I mentioned, my parents are missionaries. I was four when I went to Chile. My older brother was five, and then two sisters, three and two. So you can sort of imagine that, okay? My parents in their mid-20s with four kids at the age of, 3 to 5. Quite a challenge. Went and lived in an Indian town called Temuco in Chile. And that's where I started off pretty much my walk with God. Um, I've got to say right off the bat that growing up in a Christian home among missionaries or a pastor, whatever, is by no means a guarantee that you're going to believe this. or be saved. Um, Two of my siblings started off rejecting this vehemently and only came back to the Lord in the adulthood many years later. So many people rebel against the restrictions and whatnot. So don't get me wrong. In my case, this exposed me to the right questions. So I was asking about God's existence and the evidence at a very early age. Other than that, besides observing carefully the behavior of other missionaries, my parents, it didn't have a whole lot of influence about whether I believe or not. That was a decision that I had to make. In fact, as I grew a little bit older, I said to myself, what are the chances that I am right about everything I've been taught? The right politics, the right religion, the right everything, okay? The chance statistically is zero. Then I better be really careful about what I believe in and why. So that said, by the time I was around 7, I had been exposed to daily devotions, reading the Bible, watching my parents, watching other missions, everybody else, and knowing that despite not being perfect people, by no means, oh, their conviction and their trust in God was absolute. There was simply no room for doubt. What they'd experienced, not head knowledge, not learned, not a career, what they had personal experience with God. Hard to explain. It's like a feeling. It's something that you know, right? Was real, and that had an influence on me. And I wanted to be absolutely sure that I was saved, which meant God, I know that I'm a sinner, that I've got to repent, that you died for me. I know also that this comes as a free gift, that I can't earn it. Have I got all this right in my head? Am I saying the right things? Am I really saved? Have I overlooked anything? I really wanted to be absolutely sure that I was saved. So when I prayed, I literally did this several times when I was around 7 years old, just to be absolutely sure, and never once questioned God's existence, His love, His concern. It didn't mean that I always did the right things. You see, when you're young, things like accountability and whatnot in the far future. You're gonna die, yeah, theoretically, a long time from now, and you kind of make excuses. So it took me, a short period of time where I really said to myself, I want to dedicate my life to God. I want Him to be absolutely in control. And I guess I just watched enough people, their lives, their ruined lives, to realize that if I don't do this, things are not going to go well. So this is something that I made a strong commitment to, made a strong commitment to always telling all of my classmates in school about God. There were very few Christians back then down in southern Chile. Um, Prayed constantly, read the Bible constantly, and kept saying, God, okay, I'm willing to be a martyr for you. I'm willing to do whatever it takes. Just let me know. Uh, my life is in your hands, and I'm dedicated to you. So that was a commitment that I had made on my own without talking to other people or anything else, without any influence from my parents. Like I said, two of my siblings went the opposite direction. So this isn't just something that it's not like the Muslims that are taught pray 5 times a day. You go through a series of rituals. It wasn't like that. My parents weren't forcing me to do anything. So it was something that came out of my own heart. Um, for those that are still young, I learned some principles already in school and also into college. One is whatever you do it heartily as unto the Lord. God gives us, God gives us abilities. He gives us sometimes intelligence or the skills, and that can be used to attract people. And if they look up to you and like you or want to be around you, then of course it's a lot easier than to be credible when you tell them about your belief in God. So this is something that accompanied me a lot over these years. A lot of my classmates did become Christians. I'm in contact with people I've not seen in over 50 years. I got track of one guy yesterday for the first time who apparently had come to know the Lord more than 50 years ago, who have had no contact with since. So these kinds of bonds, relationships can be very, very strong, especially when you're young. Okay, so these are some of the principles that I learned. Also, very good influences by other Christians that wanted to help us younger people, and that was a blessing because I knew in advance that, when I reached my teenage years, I was going to be feeling feelings of rebellion because it's part of growing up and leaving the nest. There were going to be all kinds of, amorous temptations, if you know what I mean, things like that. So I was like forewarned. And so that was a big blessing also that kept me out of trouble. Now, perhaps a little unusual in my case, we already knew when I was young that by the time I was around 16, we would be going back to the States on furlough, and I'd stay behind, and they'd go back to South America because as an American, I would not be allowed to go to college in a South American university. So even from my youth, I knew that by the time I was 16, 17, I was going to be an adult. I was going to be on my own at that point. And that's okay. I was looking forward to it. I had no concerns. I was a very good student. I had many, good skills, very musical like you. Uh, really had no concerns about that. Or maybe I was naive, very possible. But that's where I went through this phase of saying, let's be careful about this. What's the evidence? I have my feelings. I've got my conviction. It all makes sense. I cannot fathom a universe without God. So what's the proof? Especially when I went to college and started hearing that all these highly educated professors and scientists were atheists. Okay, they believe in evolution. Okay, and I'm thinking to myself, hmm, what am I overlooking? You know, I mean, when you're young, you go to high school, you learn facts. You learn this is how Spanish grammar works. You don't question it. Of course it's true. This is how math works. You'd be crazy if that integral's wrong. No, it doesn't work that way. Or, here's how you play tennis properly. You learn facts. You don't question it. And then all of a sudden you're in college and you're not supposed to say, well, you learn in biology is not true. It's like you weren't trained to question these kinds of things. These are the guys that are supposed to be teaching you the truth, right? I should add that my parents were adamant against me going into science. They said I'd just get confused. Oh, they by no means. So they wanted me to go into music and theology, and they had God's plan for my life all prepared. Okay, that's why I went through a very musical background as a kid, like all my siblings. So, but I said to myself two things. One, if science is true, there cannot be a contradiction here. Um, I'm not gonna just hide in the sand and avoid facts that I should know about if they're true. See, I thought science is like true, You learn about science and this is the real world. This is the truth. I was too young to understand that a lot of science is interpretation, their models, alternative views, and science changes over time. I didn't know all that, okay? To me, as scientists say the moon is so far from the earth, it's like, right, you learn it, it's right. So that was my view. And I decided that chemistry would be like a very good foundation for any other science. So if I went on into anything, plant physiology, whatever, I would have the foundations. I couldn't go wrong with chemistry. So that's pretty much the reason I went in that direction. So um, did real well in high school and college. Had lots of friends, very popular. And I have to say that being a Christian was not difficult simply because people liked me. Okay. Like I was valedictorian in my high school and, I headed up the debate team. I was the head of the tennis team. And so people just naturally gravitate. They want to be part of the inside group. But the difference was that I had made a commitment that I was not going to be partying. I wasn't going to be doing the cool stuff, right? I was not going to have an unsafe girlfriend. That's something I can really emphasize to your audience. Try to make good friends that are close to God. Um, so many people that seem to be part of the cool crowd, look back a few years later, what happened to them? How many of them died from overdose, ended up being nobodies, right? It's really cool when you're young and your parents are financing everything. It's a little bit different when all of a sudden you're supposed to be making your own career. And then those cool skills, being rebellious and racing your car and getting drunk, nobody's going to give you a good job for those kinds of skills. So it's a loser. It's a loser proposition. And Christians usually are protected from that. Usually Christians learn skills that are actually profitable to them and to society. You're trustworthy, you're honest, you're hardworking. You're on your own way. You do it for God's glory.
Well,
So, yeah, go ahead.
well, so you had really a lot of interest in chemistry. I mean, to have, um, I mean, science is not easy. So uh, I'm presuming God really just probably put it on your heart to love that discipline. And
Yeah, chemistry is particularly bad because we got a problem. That is, if you're a good chemist, you can usually find a pretty decent job with no effort. So where do you get the teachers? Go out, you earn 2 or 3 times more as an industrial chemist than a high school teacher of chemistry. So we're going to find good chemistry high school teachers. So I got to be blunt. A lot of the difficulties with chemistry is somebody hasn't quite taken the time to orient your thinking properly. They just throw out a bunch of unfamiliar terms and then treat you like you're stupid because you didn't figure out what they could figure out at your age either,
I know, yes,
right?
yes.
It's a very unfortunate situation. I look back at my own early couple of years and several times thought to myself, I could get straight A's in psychology or anything else. Why am I doing this to myself? And then now I look back and say, that was easy. So a lot of it's just looking at things a little bit differently, looking at it properly, not being concerned and not being paranoid about tests, about grades, about always having to prove yourself in front of an examination, which kind of messes up a lot of our educations. Just worry about grades.
So okay, I just have to share this with you is that um, what had bothered me a lot about, at least in American Christian culture, is that people that weren't studying, going off to seminary, were treated as second class citizens.
Mm.
Their gifts and their interests were not valued. And that's really not biblical because God says we're all, you know, we're all parts of the body, and we're not to
Mhm,
tell one another that, we have no need of you.
mhm,
But particularly in American evangelical culture, it was horrible.
mhm,
They're
mhm.
like, "Oh, you want to go to college? You know,
Oh,
you're
no.
you're serving yourself and you're not serving the
Mm.
kingdom." And now looking in
Oh.
retrospect, I'm like, that was a terrible attitude
Mm.
because what I'm finding, first off, in my own life, the people that had restored me to faith and built my faith were the scientists
Of
and
course.
engineers.
Yeah. 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 Of
The
course.
people that had damaged me
Mhm,
still to this day had been half of the pastors and churches I've been a part of. They had,
Oh.
and there is, and it really just, people know this, and I'm sorry for the diversion, but I'm also expressing my gratitude that you chose the path you did,
Mhm,
because I have found the scale of corruption in the United States, the financial corruption is unbelievable in the churches.
mm.
Um, And I was involved in a legal probe that uncovered
Mhm.
millions, possibly tens of millions of dollars being funneled where it shouldn't be. And then in the process, I just started looking at other cases. Anyone can look this up. The Baptist Foundation, Arizona, billion, 20 years ago. It's the biggest case in American history of what they call of that sort of fraud. $500 million. In today's dollars, that would easily be $1 billion.
Mhm.
And this is not stopped. And so what I saw was people will be saying, well, we got to go share the gospel, raise up missionaries and spread the word. And then they would take that money and pocket a lot of it.
Mhm.
It's just horrible.
Mhm.
And it's in that backdrop that I said, is Christianity just a scam?
Mhm. Mhm.
So I am so grateful for the Christians who've said, my mission
Mhm.
is to use the gifts that God has given
Yeah,
me.
absolutely.
And you quoted from that passage, I think it's from Colossians,
Mhm.
whatever you do, work heartily as unto the Lord, for it is the Lord Christ you serve. And I'm like, wow. So,
Yeah.
if God has not called you to be a pastor, but to do
Yeah.
other jobs,
Mhm.
God is
Yeah.
honored. God is honored
Mhm.
uh, that you've used your gift. He know it's between you and him.
Mhm.
You've done your job, and these are the good works. And
Mhm.
so um, this is why I was so curious and also grateful you chose chemistry, even
Mhm.
though your parents had decided you were going to be a theology and music student. I'm just incredibly grateful. And I just want to encourage those who are listening, who are science students,
Yeah.
and you want to serve the Lord. Um, just, just, just think of Dr. Truman here. There are probably people whose lives you touched. So, I'm sorry if there's more you wanted to say about your journey.
Yeah. Um, this I want to follow up on your last thought, though. That is, listen. Do you think my father would have any chance reading, reaching any of the engineers or scientists at BASF with the gospel? My father, as a world class musician and theologian, who would he have any credibility at all towards reaching those people? No. That's why each one of us has been given gifts to reach a different community. If you are a super athlete, if you are a super musician or artist, or engineer or doctor, you are embedded in a community of people that see you every day, watch you, judge you, and therefore are far, far easier to approach. Nobody should go to a Nobel Prize winner in neurophysiology and blurt out nonsense and try to convert them that way. It doesn't work that way. You got to be credible. The Holy Spirit works in a reasonable manner. If they know you and see your lives, you don't have to be a neurophysiologist. Okay, I grant it. But in some manners, it's got to be a bridge, a connection. You've got to be reachable to these people. So I viewed myself as a missionary to BSF in Germany. Who else is going to reach these people?
So I we'll cover a little bit about. By the way, since I can edit this, I can rearrange the way we talk, and I just wanted to reassure you. I'm going to even edit out some of the stuff that I said or rearranged it. So I want us to have a little more freedom, not to worry about trying to be scripted, because I'm going to rescript everything and maybe just clip parts out and
Okay.
put them in a certain order. So, what you have said about your upbringing is so compelling. Now,
Yeah.
people might be thinking, well, you mentioned like when you're 7 years old and you're deciding to follow the Lord.
Right.
I want to point to a passage in scripture. King Josiah
Right.
became king at
Exactly.
age 8,
That's
and he
right.
devoted his life to the Lord.
That's
So
right.
that's an example where a child king
Absolutely.
made probably one of the biggest decisions for his life in the life of the kingdom he ruled over.
Yeah,
So let's not minimize the,
that's right.
when a child is young, because he was righteous, his heart
Right.
was in the right place at such a
Right.
young age. That
Correct.
means not only did he become king and was righteous, he probably was earlier, 6, 7 years
Of
old.
course, before he started making the right decisions and thoughts.
Decisions, yes, absolutely. I mean, this is amazing. So um, I was just so fascinated to hear what you said,
Hmm.
and also about, sometimes it'd be good for us, not for Christians, not to go through a prodigal son process.
Hmm.
And it's very compelling to see what happens to other people's lives when they don't
Yeah.
follow the Christian walk.
Look at it from a different perspective. Suppose that you don't make these decisions at a very early age. Every year that passes, you've got an enemy that's had more and more time to mold your thinking and bring you into contact with the wrong people so that you become more and more comfortable with the wrong thoughts. Um, what is right and wrong, you know? Everybody sort of sets a boundary. Now, when people become comfortable with little sins, it then becomes a little bit easier to pass that barrier to make it a little bit of a bigger sin stepwise. Okay, so by the time you're a teenager, out partying, out doing bad things behind your parents' backs, and everybody's laughing how stupid your parents are, you're becoming hardened. You're becoming blinded. And all your priorities. Think about the young girls, women in American society that are obsessed with being the most beautiful, the most attractive, the cool, and everything else. All this pride, all this thinking, or the man, the jock in the sports jock, who wants to be the superhero, drawing attention to himself, deliberately hurting other people's feelings, to show what a big macho he is. All these things are going to make it more and more and more difficult as time passes to let God mold you into being the right kind of a person. So it's a blessing when God can speak to us at an early age before we're hardened.
Well, before I forget, you mentioned music. What
Yeah.
instrument did your father play?
I don't know any instrument he couldn't play. He just,
Wow.
yeah, he looked at it. I mean, he looked at an instrument and that's it. So he was trained as a classical pianist, had a television program in Argentina for a while, played the organ a lot, but played trombone and ukulele and guitar, just everything.
Wow.
Yeah.
I could see that he passed that on to you. It is not unusual for scientists to also be musicians,
Mhm.
particularly physicists.
It's true.
It,
Hmm.
there's something about, I think, that sort of
Hmm. Yeah.
brain that seems
Yeah.
to, I mean, it feels almost very similar. So, um, let me just think here. So you shared your walk, and I
A little bit. Maybe I should just mention a little bit because you mentioned before you'd be interested in things like career and schooling and everything else. There's always grad school. Super, super important. I cannot emphasize it enough. Is that when students are struggling away, getting their degrees, with the stress that often comes, never abandon going to church or meeting with other believers or going to Christian organizations for many, many reasons. Okay. First, the spiritual reason. Second, eventually you want to get married, right? The practical reasons, but you can pray together, you can build friendships, rest your life, you can work with other people to reach your colleagues. You see, we must not think only about ourselves. When we are Believers in a college, especially in American universities, you're going to be the minority. But this is like the last stage where people's lives are being molded, right, into what kind of a character, what kind of person you're going to be. You're there for a reason. Okay, God can use you. Virtually everybody I know came to know the Lord because somebody else spoke to them. Nobody just picked up a Bible and read it and then, became a Christian. No, somebody reached out to them, and usually two or three people. Somebody first set the stage, got them to thinking. Somebody else came along and said, it sounds familiar. That other guy, I kind of brushed it off a little bit, but boy, that sure made a lot of sense. And he's saying the same sort of thing. And, that really sounds like I'm going to think about this. And so eventually, you reach a point where you know enough, and you got to make a decision. But people, you and I, we must make ourselves available, or others simply will not have the opportunity.
So this was in what was the university you went to?
Michigan State, I went to Michigan and Michigan State for my 2 degrees.
Wow. So now, did you get your PhD in chemistry first, and then you got
Yeah.
your computer science studies?
No, no, no. Computer science and chemistry concurrently from New York, bachelor's, and then PhD, and then the MBA after I started working.
So, did you do any computational chemistry professionally then? I mean, is
Uh, yes, actually, yes. At BSF, they pretty much said who's supposed to supervise you. I mean, you're the only guy who seems to know about all the math and computing and chemistry. So just do everything you think you should be doing. So for many years, I did a lot of modeling about chemical processes, about formulations. I would build big databases to collect all the data I needed, and then build all the models to understand why these things work the way they work.
well, so there's one area of chemical physics and computational chemistry, and I'm interested in looking into.
Mhm.
Um, I found out only recently, and I'm embarrassed to admit this. They said, okay, aside from the hydrogen atom, we don't have any nice closed form solutions for the Schrodinger equation.
That is correct. I wasn't in that at that ultra theoretical, but far more in the empirical area. Meaning, I would do all sorts of mathematical modeling based around projection, least squares, or regression analysis, empirical type modeling. So here are the variables. Use whatever variables you want to predict these outcomes. And the trick was to find out what is relevant and how to combine these variables to predict the behavior totally empirically. Of course, using chemical judgment, you could take shortcuts and say, well, I've got to obviously take that and that into account, and I don't have the right data, so I've got to have the right data to build the right models. But it wasn't in the quantum mechanical type areas you're describing.
Well, just we can talk about this backstage, but if you have any contacts in that field, um, I'm I would be deeply grateful
Hmm.
because it would help us give a little more credibility to some of our claims, uh, because it's dealing with chemical physics, and it's also just really interesting. One of the things that is helping now is we have much more computational power.
True.
So when you get to the hydrogen atom's just like single body problem. When you
Yeah.
get to even a slightly more complex molecule, the,
You got emergent effects that you cannot interpolate or extrapolate from like an atom.
yeah, it starts to become nightmarish. But we're starting to tackle it for a few molecules,
Hmm.
and I was talking with a fellow science student. He was laughing. He said, "Yeah, we can barely do anything with, even with just beyond the trivial. It is so hard the amount of computational power you need to resolve
Hmm.
this." And we've had some brilliant scientists, like Born and Oppenheimer, building the first approaches that were just all approximations.
Yeah.
So, but the reason I'm interested in this is I actually
Mhm.
think we can even make stronger arguments against natural origin of life.
Mhm.
Um, let me run this by you, since you are a longtime scientist. If people ask me why do I think life is a miracle, I'd
Mhm.
say it's fundamentally easier. It's far easier to break than to make.
Oh yeah.
That's very colloquial. You have so many chemical degrees of freedom, physical
Right.
degrees. You can,
Right.
especially with organic molecules, and since you're an organic chemist, there's
Mhm.
so many ways to arrange the same set of atoms.
Right.
And only a few ways can you arrange these atoms to make something as spectacular as a cell that can reproduce.
Right. Absolutely correct. Don't forget one thought. It's not just the statistical probability, but the problem of unavoidable interference. Unavoidable interference. For example, you mentioned isomerization. In the case of amino acids, D and L. Okay. All right. You could one argument, and it's a true argument, but it's a weak argument. Is okay. What's the probability of having a bunch of only L amino acids in a row to get a proper protein? That is a correct argument. However, think about the law of big numbers in mathematics. You've got a huge number of D's, a huge number of L's. You cannot avoid mixing the polymers that you form. LLDD, LDD, that's one strand. And then the next one starts off as LLDL, it's another one. And these things are all mixed together in the same vessel. That means that now if you want to have these proteins actually doing something, like two proteins have to find themselves and exactly the right portion of this protein has got to interact with that one right there. The problem now is just interference. You've got all these other molecules binding, interfering all at the same time. That means you have no way for the two right things to get together and simply find each other. So the interference problem is even worse.
Yes, and I can't. This is amazing because on the internet I was talking about the importance of homochirality, and some of these professional biologists were just dismissing it. They said, "Oh, it could evolve into homochiral. It could start off as racemic." But now that after I studied biochemistry,
No.
the first three classes, they said, "Look
Yeah.
at the Ramachandran plot.
Right.
You cannot form these secondary structures. You're not going to have a stable
It's no
alpha
good.
helices. What about your
Correct.
beta strands?"
That's
And then
right.
so you had recently criticized
Yeah.
Grayson Hawk about
Mhm.
the amyloid hypothesis.
Yeah.
I was in a debate with him. I
Mm.
said, "This is nonsense.
Right.
How are you going to make membrane bound
Protein.
transmembrane proteins?
Right.
How are you going to?" And I said, "What about the homochirality problem?"
Right.
He made up stuff in debate. I'm kind of resentful of his conduct because he'll just make up
Right.
stuff. He said, "Oh yeah,
I know.
the Gibbs free energy will favor the formation of homochirality." And I was like,
No, it's backwards.
no,
Backwards.
that's totally
Backwards.
wrong.
It's backwards.
It's backwards." But he stated in debate, and in what they call Brandolini's law, you don't have time to correct someone because if I spent, you know, in 3 minutes he'll say so many falsehoods, it'll take me
Right.
2 hours
Correct.
to
That's the
refute it.
problem. That's the problem with faith. It's not only the problem of forming the homochiral polymers. If it did form, that wouldn't solve the problem because they racemize quickly afterwards in real time, right? So it doesn't do any good. So all this crap about anything start off with some kind of self-regulating cycle that kind of amplifies itself or whatever. Um, it just doesn't do any good. Um, Basically, what happens is you've got the two L's that are connected. This critical amide bond here breaks, and now it's flat. And now it comes together either like this or like this. And that's why racemizes. It's that simple. And this happens automatically, especially in water. It happens with free radicals. It just happens with time. So this is the aspect of entropy that I like to emphasize. Entropy in the sense of the statistically most likely outcome, not the extremely theoretical, mathematical sort of an approach. With the two give the same results, amazingly, okay? But the intuition of entropy is quite simple. If you have 1,000 dice all facing with a six up, that is a highly improbable special case. Mix it as often as much as you want, and you steadily get less and less and less of all sixes. That's the aspect of entropy that I like to emphasize, the most likely outcome. And that is like because of law of large numbers, uh, you could get an exception if you had a peptide that's like 3 long and only one of those. Okay, it's like half times a half times a half. Okay, yeah, maybe get a tripeptide that's 3 long and only one molecule, right? The problem is when you got trillions of the stuff and they're longer, the system as a whole cannot deviate from anything but the statistical middle. Statistically, it can't. It just can't deviate from that.
Well, I wanted to say, okay, we're on the same page
Yeah.
because I'm glad that I'm not out on a limb. I've been
Mhm.
saying, look, this to me, this is like the binomial distribution.
Mhm.
If you have a fair coin, and
Yep.
if you have
Exactly.
fair coins, a system of say a bazillion fair coins, you flip
It
them
is.
randomly.
That's all it is.
The average number of heads will be 50%. That's the law of large numbers. That is
Right.
the equilibrium condition.
Right.
And life is kind of in a quasi
Wait.
equilibrium.
Wait. 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 You've got it. You're on the right track.
Okay.
You're right. That is a binomial distribution. However, everything except the two extreme ends are of any value. Any combination in the middle is worthless. That means if you had a protein with 95% L and 5% D, or vice versa, any in the binomial probabilities, in the whole distribution, everything is wrong except the one case of all heads or all tails.
Yes.
Everything in the middle is screwed up.
Yeah. Yes. Because you can clearly. This is what my jaw dropped that some people just dismiss that. I'm just like, look, this is basic biochemistry 201. Your first three classes, you're going to see it struck at me from Leniger's principles. They showed the Ramachandran plots of the L and D. They said, okay, the helice, the alpha helice will turn
Right,
one way if it's all right-handed,
right,
turn
right,
the other way if it's all left. So what do you
right,
think is going to happen if you
right.
mix it? You're not going to have a helix, which
It's not
is
going to work.
critical.
It's not going to work.
And
Exactly.
so you're not going to have a stable protein structure because if they interconvert between left and right, you're breaking apart
It
the
can't. That's
geometry.
happening. Exactly. The three-dimensional geometry now means that if you have a mixture of isomers, it means the folding now is in every conceivable rearrangement possible. And you cannot have a living system where you've got a trillion protein copies of the same protein and every one is geometrically different. It never work. You
Yeah.
see, so you've got to have a reliable folding so that the different portions of the protein in 3 dimension are identical.
See,
Otherwise, and that's why it's absolutely necessary. It had to be all L or all D. Nothing else works.
this is why it's easier actually for me to try to say the origin of life research is at best it's delusional.
Yeah.
At worst,
They
it's
ignore they,
fraudulent. I'm
they, they
not
ignore they ignore all these things.
ignore these things. It's easier for me to talk to someone that actually understands this level of chemistry,
The issue.
because
The issue.
because they can actually see it. I could talk that language and say, look, this is not going to solve itself.
Right.
If we're talking basic things like Gibbs free energy,
Yeah.
and what the equilibrium condition is. So if the
Right.
equilibrium condition is
Right.
racemic, this is really
Right.
bad. Therefore, life is kind of like,
Right.
the origin of it is kind of unnatural.
Absolutely. It's simply everything had to be put in place quickly all at once in a machine like nature, so that these components could all work properly together. Look, this whole idea of proteins racemizing is actually used in archaeology to date proteins. It's a natural process. You can avoid it.
Yes. So, um, I would love to have another session with you someday.
Hmm.
This was probably the most important, where you could share your testimony.
Yeah. Okay.
So, and plus, I know we have an upcoming meeting not too long.
Hmm.
Another one. Both of us might attend that one on Zoom. So, uh, so just some closing thoughts.
Hmm.
You would criticize the amyloid hypothesis on James Tour's channel.
Hmm.
I was really moved to see James Tour reach out to you and
Hmm.
invite you, because he's a very respected, one of the most respected chemists on the planet,
Hmm. Hmm.
and he noticed your expertise,
Hmm.
um, and he was able to interact with you. Now, I didn't get to watch all of the episodes. I did watch the first one because I
Hmm.
had debated Grayson Hawk on
Hmm.
the amyloid hypothesis, and I only had 10 minutes to criticize,
Hmm.
and he was just making stuff up in the debate,
Yeah.
depending his viewpoint.
Yeah. That's not
What
right.
I was so impressed with was you used computational analysis
Hmm.
on some aspects of the amyloid. There was one thing where you said, um, and I may have gotten this wrong, the more likely bond is between not L and L, but L and D.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
Somehow, okay. Well,
Look. About the amyloid world, there's a principle there that applies to so much of origin of life, and it's a take-home message. And it actually only showed up at the end of part two because it's intended as the dessert or as the nail in the coffin. Maybe I should have put it at the beginning where more people could see it or not. There's something fundamentally wrong about all the experiments, everything used that they always try to do to, let's say, justify origin of life experiments. One is you need an enormously high concentration of whatever it is you're working with. In the case of the amyloids, you're talking about something of the consistency of honey. But what is it? We're talking about peptides. Now, how many peptides show up in water? It's inorganic. It hydrolyzes in water. It doesn't form water at all. So you want to now form like peptides that are, let's just say, about 10 units long. You would not have had one in the history of the world in water, just thermodynamically, not one. And they want to have identical copies, the amyloids, to work properly. It's like a crystal. It's not amorphous, they're crystals. So you got identical copies, so concentrated, it looks like honey. And then to make the matters worse, when you look at the amino acids that are necessary, you can't use stuff like glycine, which has got no structure. Glycine is the simplest amino acid. There's no D or L. It's the only one that's got two hydrogens, right? 99% of all amino acids that would have existed in nature would have been glycine because it's easy stuff to form. Okay, so and then you look at the kinds of stuff that are used for amyloid, for all the other origin of life experiments. They're using very, very rare amino acids that have a lot of structure. So now you got to use a little common sense. You need to have a certain length to do anything of any value, whether it's RNAs or proteins. You got to have a certain length, and all of this stuff hydrolyzes in water. Okay, and these are extremely unusual monomers that are necessary to form the right structures. It is obvious at a glance to chemists that not one of those strands would have existed in the history of the world, not one. And they're putting and just look at Avogadro's number, like molar, 6.023 times 10 to the minus 22. Think about how many of these things are packing together in like a few milliliters of water. A vast number of identical monomers that would have never formed, and nobody even questions it. They just go, they buy the stuff from a company, they mix it in the laboratory, and then do whatever it is they
Right.
want to do. Where where are all of the other materials that would have been present? We're talking about amino acids.
Right. You
Where are
would
all
have
the
all these,
alcohols? Where's everything else that would have formed? When they
and
say
these, yeah, these interference reactions.
Of course. So when they say things like, "Oh, well, okay, yeah, so this stuff is very dilute," but if you had literally, this is the stuff I'm hearing. If you had like a big lake and a few of these like nucleotides or amino acids, were to land the lake, it evaporates and that concentrates it. And I'm saying, yeah, it's concentrating everything. So you now end up with like mud, 100 meters deep, a couple miles wide, and maybe three molecules separated in all this mud with everything else that's in there.
Yep.
So
Oh,
it's like, what the world are the guys talking about?
just to protect you a little bit, Avogadro's number 6.022 times 10 to the 23rd.
Yeah.
Uh, there's You'd interchange the numbers. I just don't want anyone
Oh,
to get on your case. Just
okay.
want it. But the other thing was when I was in the debate with Grayson, I looked then at your review of the amyloid hypothesis. I looked at some of the papers because he threw that on me in a debate. He said, "Oh, you're not aware of that? We're
Mhm.
moving forward." And again, that's Brandolini's law. He throws something in debate I'm not familiar with, and then I look it up, and it's like my jaw dropped how bad this was.
Mhm.
Because the amyloid hypothesis is are things that normally would make beta strands.
Of
And I
course.
specifically said in the debate, how are you going to form all these other proteins like transmembrane proteins,
Right.
topoisomerases,
Right.
helicases? And then now that I looked at it, I said, you can't build these proteins if you build them all by beta strands. You
Of
need alpha
course.
helices. I'm just
But
like,
you don't from the beta strands either because that's also you got to have the homochirals.
yeah. I mean, and then of course he was saying, no, it's not a problem. The gives free energy favors it being homochiral in the amyloid, and just like that's I didn't have a chance. I said, I don't believe you.
That, by the
So I
way,
just
that
make
is
it up
that
so confidently.
since you're looking into the area of thermodynamics and everything else, that is a really important area and something to think about if you want to get into origin of life and everything else. Okay, everything you're talking about, whether it's putting a phosphate on a sugar as part of the process of making a nucleotide, downhill, that hydrolyzes, bad. Want to attach a sugar to a nucleobase, that's called the glycosidic bond, bad. Okay. Want to form a ribose in water, bad. It hydrolyzes. Want to have two nucleotides bond through a diphosphate ester bond, it's like that is 20 22 kilojoules per mole. Like the equilibrium is so far to the left of hydrolysis, it's a disaster. Every step of the way, all the thermodynamics is wrong. Thermodynamics best understood in the sense of alternatives. You're going to have far more of, let's say, the simple molecules than the stuff you want. This is blatant in literature. They will take solvents to get something to run because they know water is going to mess it up. That solvent in water would hydrolyze, but not fast enough to stop them from doing an experiment in the laboratory, right? So you start off when it's nice and cool. Okay, you buy the formamide or whatever you want to use for a solvent, and then it's nice and cool. You get everything prepared, nice and concentrated, pure, distilled. Everything's nice and go. You count to three, put everything together, and then you get your want. And then typically you stop everything real fast before it's destroyed. Always look at these experiments and ask yourself time. Why did they stop the experiment in 30 seconds? Why did they stop it at 37 minutes? Why did they stop it exactly 1 year? There's a reason. Because they put everything together to get the kinetics to work under an unusual constellation, which immediately falls apart. So when they do these experiments like the amyloid or whatever, uh, if they say stuff like, well, there's heat, wet, dry cycles, you evaporate it, and that allows some of these condensation reaction to occur, and then you put a little bit of water in it. Okay, you can say, okay, let's think about that. What kind of temperature do you want to work with? Well, 80 degrees. Okay, fine. So you got a lake now at 80 degrees for a few years, decades, thousands of years. Fine. Make that assumption, not the laboratory. This is the assumption. So you've got a lake at 80 degrees. Do you think you can have any peptides, any sugars, any nucleotides? Do you think you can have any biomolecule in a lake that's been sitting around for a few hours or days or weeks or months or years at 80 degrees? You're not going to have anything. So that's why in the laboratory, they'll start off at room temperature, mix everything on a nice pure surface, pure materials, maybe form a nice film, evaporate the water off, do this once or twice, and then terminate the experiment, whatever you do. Why? Always ask that question. Why did you stop after 2 cycles? Why? Because they see what happens. You get a little bit what you want, it goes up, and starts going back down again because it degrades. Heat is a big enemy, screws everything up. Water screws everything up. Fine. Then face the reality. You want to have millions of years for stuff to work? Do you think you're going to have any polypeptides in water surviving for millions of years? Of course not.
Well, okay, so and I know we have another meeting coming up, so
Mm-hmm.
we'll have to continue this. This is so exciting.
Mm-hmm.
This is motivating me. I'm having students come on the channel, and I said, I'll teach you.
Mm.
So we have computer science students. We have brilliant students that don't have chemistry. I said, you're going to be able to pick up the essentials.
Okay.
We can diagram it. Because
Yeah.
when you actually understand, these people are math savvy.
Yeah.
And I could say, look, law of large numbers, we have to translate this, understand equilibrium
Yeah.
conditions.
Right.
And
Exactly.
it's not that hard. What I am seeing, and it's so funny, Clemens Reichert had helped us coin the word the hand of God dilemma,
Mm-hmm.
because he's saying, look at all this investigator interference.
Yeah.
What they're
Yeah.
claiming
Yeah.
as evidence of origin of
Yeah.
life, it's actually reflecting
Mm.
the
Exactly.
hand of God.
The need first of all of a planner, and second to put everything together very, very rapidly. I'm having a gold mine now. I'm getting ready to submit something. Actually, I'm going to make a presentation in about a week, also for James Tour on the DNA world. Okay, it's like the insanity. If you want to form nucleotides periodically, not easy. The only thing they can come up with is to polymerize hydrogen cyanide, HCN. And how does that work? Because the stuff evaporates. It's like it doesn't concentrate. You've got to concentrate this stuff, okay? The only way to get this work in the laboratory is you work at around minus 20 degrees Celsius, minus 20 degrees. Now, your friend Grayson and others, they want to do wet, dry cycles at 80 to 100 degrees Celsius. You see a problem?
Yeah.
if you want to create sugars, you need a pH of around 7. That destroys everything else you wanted to do, right? Um, your pH is all wrong. Your temperatures are all over the wall. If you want to get this, you work at minus 20 degrees. But if you want to get this, you got to work 100 degrees or 80 degrees. Okay, fine. Work 80 degrees. And you wiped out everything else.
Exactly.
It's
So,
it's
so
it's,
no,
it's
yeah, what I'm seeing is, and I'm going to emphasize this model. You have the idea of having a factory process. You compartmentalize the stages. It has to
exactly,
be in the right order. In fact, when
exactly
we're trying to synthesize
right,
Change Tan and Rob Stadler did a beautiful illustration of this. They said, look, they actually took stuff that's actually well known, but when I saw the diagram, when you want to add one nucleotide, you
right,
know, at a time,
right.
you have to do exactly what you said. You change, you add your protecting groups, and then you do this, and you remove them, and you put them back, and then you start the cycle over again. It has to be in
And then you
a.
cool it down real fast so it doesn't wipe itself out within 2 hours. And then you store it in the refrigerator. It's like, come on, give me a break.
So people will say, well, obviously life works, so it has to be probable. I said, the
Ah,
problem is what is the a priori probability you're going to have a factory process? You need a
and
factory
you
process.
need and then why does it work? Now we're asking right questions. Now all of a sudden we're going into a cell and we see things like repair mechanisms, or we want RNA to be unstable so that after it's done its job, it's no longer hanging around and interfering with everything else. So there's a reason. There's a reason first why it worked. Why it works at all, but it would never have arisen on its own unguided.
So
So there are
so
two
they're all
problems.
so there are all these very well timed, orchestrated,
Exactly.
orchestrated. You have to have
Absolutely.
you have to have the the uh, the reactants, the reagents
Right.
will make a product, but then those products end up being the reagents, reactants for the next process, just like a
Exactly.
factory.
Under
And I
under incompatible conditions. In this case, you want to use UV light to get the reaction to work, and then you store it in the refrigerator, and then you go to the laboratory next door, and now you got to be very, very careful not to have any UV light because that would screw up that second part. So you put all these things separately, and then you bring it together. So, and one thing it's really important that you always keep in the back of your mind. It's not just that you're putting molecules, you're building them separate. Now you got to put them together. And that is where you end up with a nightmare. Uh, I didn't draw a picture that would have helped, but if you look at a nucleotide, it's got sugar in the middle, it's got a base over here, and then it's got a phosphate over here. Now, think of all the different ways you could have put those three things together. You've got the hydroxyl groups, okay? You could have put multiple phosphorus groups together. You could have put the phosphorus group on the C5 or the C1 or the C2 or the 3 hydroxyl. You could have put all these together, right? In different orders. So, in reality, it's bad enough that you can't put the components together. You've got to now assemble it in a manner that you only get that one out of the hundreds or thousands of isomers.
exactly what you've see now. You just kind of the colloquial phrase. I'm going to say so infinitely many ways to break,
Exactly.
only a few ways to make. There
Exactly.
might be many alternatives to make
Right.
life. Actually, we have examples of it. You have the eukaryotes and prokaryotes, the
Right.
implement. But when people have said, well, there's just not, you keep saying that it's just one way. And I'm like, no,
No, no. The proportion
portion.
is infinite. The proportion is zero, no matter how you cut it.
Because what I said, look, there are an infinite number of ways to make an automobile. It
Right.
doesn't make it highly probable because
Exactly.
there's so many infinitely more ways that you can
Exactly.
not, make something that doesn't even work, much less
Exactly.
an automobile. So, and finally, before I close, I wanted to talk a little bit about entropy. I've studied mixing
Okay.
entropy a
Okay.
lot. We cannot we cannot minimize the problem of contamination
Right.
in mixing the wrong things, and then
Right.
dilution. That is,
Right.
if you look in chemistry books, you'll see the word mixing entropy.
Yeah.
So one of the most basic forms of entropy is just being able to purify.
Exactly.
It's very difficult to purify. You're
Yeah.
fighting against the natural equilibrium
Right.
many
Exactly.
times.
Exactly. Oh, yeah, always, always. That's why. That's why. It's always good in talking about origin of life and whatnot to keep in mind what it is you're trying to explain. It means keep in mind what the cell's doing. The cell is manufacturing pristine components every time. It's always creating the L amino acids. It's always creating of all the isomers is only creating the correct nucleotide with the right base to it. Always, every time. If you don't start off with what the origin life chemists do, which is pure ingredients and force them to connect the right way, you quickly end up with such a mishmash entropy that is worthless. And that's exactly what the cell's doing. The cell is regulating every step of it. That's why you've got the DNA that is automatically creating the right sequence of proteins automatically. Then you've got the other parts that make sure, like for example, in the ribosome, it makes sure that the chemical reaction occurs at the right way, at the right time, the right location. It's high energy and click, you've got the amide bond forming. It's all carefully choreographed to react to only give you the right one.
It,
The ribosome, is timed so that the rate at which the protein comes off gives enough time to fold properly. So every component that the cell builds has got an extreme quality control set of measures that are all absent in nature.
yes, and so what we're seeing is with these origin of life chemists working so hard to get just a few reactions, it's showing they're basically showing
Yeah,
what the cell is able to accomplish.
right.
It's able to orchestrate things at so many levels beyond what we can do. We cannot manufacture some
Right.
of these chemicals in the purity and the organization. We're not even close. The cell
Every
can do that.
every single process cell, every biochemical reaction, I have not encountered a single exception. Everyone is regulated.
Yeah.
There's a start point, and then you don't want to flood the cell. You don't want the cell to create too many copies of the same messenger RNA. You don't want the messenger RNA to lay around too long. So the codes that indicate its half life. Some should last longer because more is needed. The mRNA will be used more often, and others less. Everything is regulated, and that's why the cell works.
Praise God. Well, Dr. Truman, we're having so much fun, but
I know,
we have we have other obligations.
I know.
Perhaps we can meet again.
Yeah,
I'm so incredibly grateful. So I'll let you have the last word to say any words of encouragement to our listeners.
tell your people that Christians that are not willing to accept blind, meaningless sense materialism, they're facing a gold mine of scientific opportunity because
Mhm.
there's so much data out there that is just not being properly looked at with the right interpretation. There's
Praise.
so much we can build models, explanations, mechanisms. You can look at everything about life and interpret it from look we can interpret it as engineers. We can say look at the coding logic. The other team can only say with time enough something happened. You've got no predictive ability. You've got nothing to say. We I don't know where to start every day because there's so much out there that needs interpreting and so much nonsense that is so easy to refute. I can only say I wish I had a few thousand more friends that could join the fun because we
Amen.
are like the only scientists around that seem to be using our heads anymore.
Well, Lord willing, our numbers will grow.
Yeah.
I'm seeing that you and I have seen it in our lifetimes. We're seeing more and more come to our side, and also being quite open about it, like James Tour. It's going to continue now. Marcus Eberlin, and I know professors throughout the land that have come forward and staked their reputation, and I expect that trend to continue. So, to my viewers, glory and honor to our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, the creator, the intelligent designer of the cell. It's been a privilege, Dr. Truman, and I hope we are able to do this again.
Hope
So,
so.
to all
Thank you for
who've joined
inviting
us,
me.
yes, take care and God bless
Okay.
you.
God bless, guys.